Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive? We're going deep on The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander.
Ooh, yeah, I've been looking forward to this one.
It's about mass incarceration,
Mhm.
but like way more than that. She makes this argument that it's like a new form of racial caste system.
Yeah, it's pretty wild how she lays it all out.
So where do we even start with this?
She kicks things off with this almost deceptively simple question.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
It's, where have all the black fathers gone?
Right. Like we hear that all the time.
Exactly. But she's saying, look, the answer is staring us right in the face.
Mass incarceration.
Exactly. It's the elephant in the room. And it's like, nobody wants to acknowledge it.
Well, and she brings up this point, even Barack Obama.
And Father's Day.
Yeah. Talking about dads needed to be more present,
Mm-hmm.
but never even mentioning.
And millions who literally can't be.
Right. Because they're behind bars. Exactly. It's like we're collectively.
And avoiding the cheers.
It's like this weird societal. Yes. Like we don't want to admit how deeply the criminal justice system
is involved in creating these disparities.
Right. It's easier to just blame individual choices than to look at the system itself.
And it's not like it's a small number of people we're talking about here.
Oh, absolutely not.
She drops the statistic that just blew my mind. I mean, ready for this.
Hit me with it.
There are more Black Americans
Okay.
under some form of correctional control today
Wow.
than were enslaved in 1850.
It's a staggering number.
It's insane. More Black Americans entangled in the justice system now than were enslaved before the Civil War.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is it's become so normalized.
Right. Like these statistics are horrifying.
But it's like we've just kind of shrugged and accepted them as like a fact of life.
It makes you wonder, have we become numb to these numbers?
I know I have at times.
Yeah, me too. And it's a little scary to think about.
It is. It's like, have we lost our capacity for outrage?
So Alexander calls this whole thing the new Jim Crow.
Yeah. And, she's not saying it's like old school, blatant racism.
Right. It's more subtle than that.
It's a system of control that pretends to be colorblind, but it's not at all. It's like, that birdcage analogy she uses.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Each individual law or policy might not seem oppressive on its own, right? But
it could put them all together.
Yeah, and they form this system that traps people.
And guess who's disproportionately caught in that cage?
Exactly.
And it's not even just laws, right?
Oh, no, it's so much more than that.
It's how the police operate, how courts function.
It's like our whole way of thinking about crime and punishment.
Yeah, the whole system is set up in a way that perpetuates these inequalities.
And she breaks it down into these 3 stages.
Okay, let's hear it.
The roundup, formal control, and then this thing she calls invisible punishment.
Ooh, invisible punishment. I like where this is going.
Each stage, builds on the last one.
Making it nearly impossible to escape.
Right, like a trap.
Okay, so first up, the roundup.
Okay. All right, so this is where
Police are targeting.
Specifically, poor communities of color.
For drug offenses.
Yeah, and often using racial profiling.
Which is just so messed up.
And what makes it even worse? Like, what actually incentivizes them to do this?
I have a bad feeling about this.
Things like drug forfeiture laws.
Where they get to seize assets,
And
then there's that federal funding that's tied to drug arrests.
It's like a messed up reward system.
It really is. It's like they're being rewarded for targeting these communities.
And, to be fair, she's not saying that every single police officer is intentionally racist.
Right, right.
But the structure of the system itself
allows for
encourages it even. Like it creates this environment where racial bias can thrive.
So then we move on to formal control.
So this is after someone's been arrested.
And they're often pressured.
To plead guilty.
Even if they're innocent.
Yeah, maybe they can't afford a good lawyer or the system just feels stacked against them.
Right, and even for minor drug offenses,
they could be facing these crazy, harsh sentences.
It's mind-boggling.
And what's really striking is how these sentencing laws just disproportionately hammer communities of color.
Even though they're not explicitly about race?
Exactly. Like, take the war on drugs.
Oh, don't even get me started on that.
It's been used to justify all these policies that have led to mass incarceration of Black and brown people.
Even though studies show that drug use is pretty similar across racial lines?
It's just mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's just when you think it can't get any worse.
You get to invisible punishment.
Right. This kicks in after someone's already done their time.
It's like even after you've served your sentence,
you're still being punished.
You're hit with this legal discrimination in everything.
Jobs, housing,
voting, even getting access to public benefits.
It's like a permanent mark.
That makes it nearly impossible to escape the shadow of that conviction.
It's like the system is designed to keep people trapped.
Yeah, like a revolving door.
And it makes me so angry.
I get it. It's infuriating.
So this is where I get a little stuck. Like, how can we call the system racist if it's not explicitly about race?
That's the question, isn't it? And it's easy to just,
Brush it off.
yeah, blame individuals and call it a day. But Alexander's really challenging us to think deeper,
Okay, I'm listening.
to see how indifference, like turning a blind eye, can be just as harmful as outright hostility.
Okay, yeah, break that down for me.
Like, imagine if you're indifferent to the suffering of a certain group.
Okay.
You're more likely to just accept the injustices they face.
Well, you might even start to think they deserve it.
Exactly. And that lack of caring allows the system to keep running.
Without anyone acknowledging the racial bias built into it.
It's insidious, really.
It really is.
It's like this silent form of racism that's hard to pinpoint, but the effects are undeniable.
So we're seeing how this, lack of caring, this indifference really fuels the system. But how else does mass incarceration actually function as this system of racial control? You mentioned the new Jim Crow. Are there, actual parallels to the Jim Crow era?
Oh, yeah, tons. The parallels are kind of scary, actually. First, you got legalized discrimination. Think about it. Ex-offenders face legal barriers to jobs, housing, voting. It's just like black people under Jim Crow.
Wow, yeah. And then there's that whole thing of being shut out of the political process. We've seen that before, too, right?
Yep. Political disenfranchisement, felony disenfranchisement laws, which stop people with felonies from voting, hit black men super hard. It's crazy similar to what they did to suppress black voters during Jim Crow.
It's like we learned nothing. It's really disheartening.
And then on top of that, there's segregation. Mass incarceration concentrates black and brown people in prisons and then just releases them back into segregated communities, which just keeps the cycle of poverty and crime going.
So it's not just about individuals being punished, right? It's about keeping certain groups down, under control. It feels almost intentional.
That's the point Alexander is making. The label criminal has basically become synonymous with blackness in America.
So it's not even just about having a criminal record. It's
the label itself. It becomes a racial stigma, impacting even those who haven't actually been charged with anything.
Think about it. How easily do we accept the image of, a black drug criminal? But then the idea of a white criminal, it feels almost off, doesn't it?
It shows how deeply ingrained these biases are. We perceive criminality through a racial lens without even realizing it.
It's really disturbing, but it's a wake-up call, too. So if just reforming the system isn't enough to dismantle this new Jim Crow, what will it take? It feels so huge. Where do we even begin?
$1 million question. Alexander tackles this head on in the book, and, well, there's no easy answer. She's calling for a total shift in how we as a society think about race, crime, and justice.
Okay, so what does that even look like? How do we even begin to challenge something so deeply embedded in our society?
She argues it has to go beyond legal strategies. We need a much bigger conversation about race, poverty, justice. We need to challenge the dominant narratives, expose what's really going on, and really wake people up.
That sounds like a massive undertaking, but it also feels incredibly urgent. Where do we even start?
Well, for one, we got to start with the truth, right? Acknowledge the reality of mass incarceration. It's not about a few bad apples or individual failings. It's systemic. It's rooted in our history, perpetuated by policies that hurt communities of color.
But Alexander also says there are some key differences between mass incarceration and Jim Crow. The biggest one being the lack of outright racial hostility. We don't see that same blatant racism that was everywhere during Jim Crow. It's subtler, harder to spot.
That's a good point. And because of that, because it's not as in your face, it's easy to just brush it off, blame it on other things.
Like crime rates or personal choices.
Exactly. But Alexander says that focusing on individual responsibility just ignores the bigger picture. She points out that mass incarceration is in some ways even more insidious than Jim Crow.
Because it hides behind this veil of colorblindness.
Right. It makes it so much harder to call out.
It's like putting on a disguise, pretending to be something it's not.
Exactly. Alexander's argument is that this colorblindness is a total illusion. The system is anything but neutral. It's designed to target and trap communities of color, no matter what anyone says.
And it's so disturbing how the system just keeps reinforcing racial segregation by locking up tons of black and brown people, mainly for drug offenses, and then releasing them back into these same segregated communities.
Yeah, it creates this cycle that's almost impossible to escape.
You're more likely to get targeted by the police if you live in a poor, segregated neighborhood, and then if you are convicted, you're more likely to end up back in that same neighborhood where there are fewer opportunities and you're under constant surveillance. It's like set up to fail.
It's a vicious cycle,
It's heartbreaking. And it's not even just physical segregation, right?
right? It's symbolic too. That label, criminal, it sticks to you. It becomes a racial stigma that follows you even after you've served your time.
So it impacts literally every area of your life.
Every area. Alexander talks about how this stigma shapes how we view race in America. That image of the black criminal is so powerful, it's almost impossible to see black men as anything else.
Like, that label becomes their only defining characteristic.
Exactly. And that has these devastating consequences, not just for individuals, but for whole communities.
Okay, so if this system is so deeply ingrained, how do we even begin to dismantle it? It just feels overwhelming.
Alexander argues that a key first step is recognizing the humanity of those caught in the system, seeing them as people, not just criminals.
But that's so much easier said than done. It's hard to have compassion when someone's committed a crime, especially when, you or someone you know has been affected by crime.
Of course, and Alexander gets that. She's not saying we should excuse crime, but she is asking us to look past the individual act and see the bigger picture.
To see the forces that lead to these situations.
Exactly. To understand that the system itself is creating criminals.
It's setting people up to fail.
And just perpetuating this cycle of poverty, crime, and punishment that disproportionately harms communities of color.
It's a total perspective shift.
Right. Seeing the whole system, not just individual actions.
And she's challenging us to imagine a different approach.
One that's based on restoration, not punishment. On healing, not retribution. It's a whole different way of thinking.
But how do we actually get there? How do we shift from this system of fear and punishment to one that's based on compassion? It feels impossible.
It's not going to be easy. We have to challenge the way we think about crime and punishment. We have to start seeing those caught in the system as human beings.
Not just criminals.
Exactly. But Alexander also warns against getting too hung up on the differences between mass incarceration and Jim Crow. She says it can actually make the problem seem smaller than it is.
Like we're trying to convince ourselves it's not that bad.
Right. We can't get caught up in semantics. Mass incarceration is a racial caste system. It's designed to control and marginalize communities of color. No two ways about it.
And she argues that this system just isn't sustainable.
It's morally wrong, it's a drain on the economy, and it's destroying communities.
So she's calling for a radical transformation.
A movement that challenges the core of our criminal justice system, reimagining what justice could look like.
It's a huge undertaking, but it's important to understand what's at stake here. The future of our society depends on our willingness to face these uncomfortable truths.
And to demand a system that's actually just and equitable.
And it's not just about Black and brown communities, it's about all of us.
Exactly. When we allow a system to target and marginalize entire groups of people, it diminishes all of us. We're all worse off.
It's a really powerful message, and I think it resonates with anyone who cares about justice and equality. It's a call to action. It's a call to do better.
And it's more relevant than ever. We're seeing the rise of mass surveillance, the erosion of civil liberties, the criminalization of poverty and dissent. The fight against mass incarceration is part of a much bigger fight for social justice.
And that's a fight that demands our attention, our action, and our unwavering commitment to creating a just and humane society. We can't afford to sit this one out. So we spent the last 2 parts of this deep dive really digging into this whole idea of mass incarceration as a new form of racial caste system, like Michelle Alexander lays out in The New Jim Crow.
That's heavy stuff.
It is, but hey, knowledge is power, right? So now I'm thinking, where do we go from here? How do we even begin to challenge a system this big, this ingrained?
That's the question, isn't it? And Alexander, she doesn't really offer any, easy answers.
Yeah, no magic bullet.
Right. But she does lay out some strategies for change.
Okay, I'm all ears.
And, one thing she's super clear about is this isn't about just tinkering around the edges.
Yeah, she even says that, right? Something like, tinkering is for mechanics, not racial justice advocates.
Exactly. She's calling for a complete overhaul, a radical transformation.
Okay, so what does that even look like? What are some actual steps we can take?
Well, one of the biggest things she pushes for is ending the war on drugs.
Right. We talked about how that's been this huge driver of mass incarceration and how it's been used to target communities of color.
Exactly. And ending it, it would require a massive shift, not just in policy, but in, how we view drugs as a society.
Yeah, it's about seeing addiction as a health issue, not a criminal one.
Absolutely. And think about it, Treating it that way, it would be so much more effective, more humane.
I mean, it just makes sense. But it's not just about drug policy, is it?
No, it's about tackling those root causes of crime.
Those social and economic conditions that push people in that direction.
Exactly. Imagine if we actually invested in things like education, job training, affordable housing, healthcare,
Things that actually give people a chance.
help them break free from those cycles of poverty and despair.
Yeah, creating opportunity instead of just...
Punishment.
Right. She also talks about needing a huge culture shift in law enforcement, right?
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. Like instead of approaching communities with fear and this focus on punishment.
What if we focused on, like, compassion and restoration?
Yes.
Yeah.
Viewing people in these marginalized communities not as like potential criminals.
But as partners in creating safer neighborhoods.
Exactly. And that means like rethinking the role of police,
Investing in community-based solutions.
prioritizing de-escalation, restorative justice.
It's a whole different way of thinking about public safety.
And she stresses that this can't just be a top-down thing.
Right, it has to come from the ground up.
Exactly. It requires grassroots organizing, community engagement,
A real movement that brings together people from all different backgrounds.
building coalitions, finding common ground,
Because this system, it impacts us all in the end.
whether we realize it or not. It's about collective liberation.
So I'm wondering, what can we, like, as individuals do to contribute to this movement? It feels so big. Where do we even start?
Well, I'd say education is a huge first step.
Yeah.
Read Alexander's book, talk to people who've been impacted by this system, learn about the history, the realities of mass incarceration.
Yeah, the more we understand, the better equipped we'll be to actually challenge it.
Exactly. And there are so many ways to get involved, like supporting organizations working on criminal justice reform, advocating for policy changes.
Challenging those narratives that keep this system going.
Right. And it can be as simple as having conversations with your friends and family, sharing information online, going to a rally or a protest.
Every voice makes a difference.
Absolutely. And don't underestimate the power of, like, personal connection. Reach out to people who have been impacted, listen to their stories, offer support.
Yeah, empathy and understanding can really go a long way.
Breaking down those stereotypes, building bridges between communities.
It's about remembering that this isn't just some abstract political issue, it's about people's lives.
And creating a society where justice and equality are a reality for everyone, not just a select few.
Well said. Michelle Alexander, she ends her book with this really powerful call to action.
Oh yeah, it's inspiring.
She reminds us that the fight for racial justice, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
It's going to be long, it's going to be hard.
But it's a fight we can win if we
Yeah.
stay committed.
And that's what gives me hope. Even when things feel really overwhelming, we can't just sit back and accept things as they are.
The future depends on our willingness to, stand up to injustice, to demand change, to build a better world.
For ourselves and for future generations.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the new Jim Crow.
Hope you found it insightful.
Maybe even inspiring. Thanks for joining us.